Okay, I think it's a good time to go ahead and get started, and other folks can join us. Um, just want to take a second to say hi to everyone. It's nice to see some familiar names here logged in virtually. I hope this finds everyone doing well, you and your families. We know it's been a very difficult last 6 months or so. We are excited as the Youth Services Department to kind of be pivoting to a virtual model for our monthly training series. As you may know, my name is Bridget Nugent, and I serve as the Deputy Director of Tompkins County Youth Services. And the monthly training series for youth development professionals is something that we're proud of, and we always look forward to hosting each month. So we're hoping that this model works for now until we can be together in person again. So we're very excited to have today as kind of our first virtual session, Samantha Leshtak. She is a certified safety professional based here in Ithaca, New York, and she owns Absolute EHS, Environmental Health and Safety Consulting and Support Services. I imagine she's been a very busy individual the last several months, and we were excited to learn about her through our partners at GIAC, from which she came highly recommended. So just some quick housekeeping. We do have everyone on mute. We would encourage you throughout the presentation to put any questions or comments that you have in the chat, and I'll be monitoring those. Samantha said that she's open to answering questions throughout, so we'll keep it pretty informal in that regard. If we do need to unmute you, we can do that as well, but we know that keeping everyone on mute just makes it go a little bit more smoothly. This is recording, so it will be available at a future date via Samantha's link, and we can also, or website, and we can also send it out via email. So if folks weren't able to join us today, it can be something that you can point them to. So with that, I'll let Samantha provide a little bit more background on herself, and without further ado, go for it.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. So today we're going to be talking about COVID, which hopefully this is not new information, but there might be some more detail. And of course, you know, hearing kind of the same facts over and over can just help with retention. So please do feel free, as Bridget said, to put any questions you have in the chat. I'm very happy to stop, answer the question if it's pertinent at the moment. Otherwise, we'll save it until the end. So I have been doing environmental health and safety work for well over a decade now. I am a certified safety professional, a certified instructional trainer. I have a master's in occupational safety management. I also have the distinct honor of being the very first Knowledge, Skills, Abilities Quest Grand Master, according to the Board of Certified Safety Professionals. I've worked all over the States. I've worked for a bunch of international companies in all sorts of industries. So academia, R&D, commercial work, semiconductor, you name it, I've probably had a hand in it. And I am considered a generalist with respect to environmental health and safety. So all 27 subtopics of environment, health, and safety, I do have familiarity with. So COVID-19, it's a virus. A virus, by definition, is going to need a living host in order to survive. So what we mean by that is saying it's not its own organism. It's not like a bacteria that can be fed by sugar or something else and thrive on its own. The virus, as you can see in this picture, has these spike proteins, which is the part that actually binds to our internal organs and binds to the cells within our own bodies. Then there's a lipid outer layer. Lipid means fat. And then inside we have RNA that's enclosed in protein. That RNA enclosed in protein is what duplicates inside our bodies and makes us sick. So that lipid outer layer is really important. That fat is really important because when we're washing our hands, that's what we're actually breaking down for the most part. So if we talk about soap and water, we know that soap and water is best for use, and it's a lot better than hand sanitizer. And we're going to talk about that too. So soap and water actually has has a polar and a non-polar end to the molecule. That non-polar end is going to bind to the fat, which is also non-polar. And as we can see in this little picture here, it actually encapsulates the dirt, or in our case, the virus and the germs. And then the polar end binds to water, which is why we have to use clean running water when we wash our hands. And that whole, all the virus, all the dirt, all the germs are actually encapsulated and actually taken away after being broken down by soap and water. So we completely remove these viruses from our hands, from our bodies, from surfaces if we use soap and clean running water. However, with hand sanitizer, as you can see our little hand sanitizer cartoon here, hand sanitizer acts a little more like a bottle with a saw. So we're breaking apart this virus, but we're not actually removing it. And as many of us have seen on the bottle, the hand sanitizers claim to be 99.99, sometimes there's another 9% effective. What this means is there's still 0.01% of potentially live virus on you. And again, it's not actually removing anything. The other thing we need to be aware of is that the CDC recommends 60% minimum amount of alcohol in hand sanitizer when used on your hands or on your body, but a 70% minimum concentration of alcohol when we're using it on surfaces. However, if you look at WHO, the World Health Organization, they want a minimum of 80% alcohol, regardless of what it is you are sanitizing. So these are things you should be aware of and think critically about when we're looking at, a novel virus. I know we feel like it's been around forever. It's been around for 9 months now. For some of us, maybe it's only been around for 4 or 5 months. But the fact of the matter is it's still novel. We're still learning about it. So you should know what all the sources are saying. That hand sanitizer, that alcohol is jackhammering the outside, that lipid protein, that lipid membrane. So it's actually breaking apart the virus, but again, it's not actually removing it until you use soap and water. When we're cleaning our hands, we want to follow this guideline. This picture should be very familiar. World Health Organization put out a picture like this. The CDC puts out a picture like this. And I believe most restaurants have the actual step-by-step picture now if you've ventured to a restaurant. A good guideline to follow, we see this a lot in California, and particularly with nurses and frontline workers, is after you use hand sanitizer 3 times or an hour has passed since the last time you washed your hands with soap and water, you should stop what you're doing, go find a sink, and wash your hands properly. This is a really good habit to get into. We have a habit of just assuming hand sanitizer is going to keep us safe and everything's fine. And there are many people who just use it, they go through a gallon throughout the day and think it's great. But again, it's not nearly as effective as simple soap and water. So every hour or after 3 times when you feel the need to use hand sanitizer, make sure you follow up with soap and water. All right, any questions about soap and water or hand sanitizer? Okay. So COVID is an aerosol transmission. It's an aerosol transmissible. This means that it's contained in sputum. So the virus actually will bind with or spit and mucus and things that come out of our eyes and our nose, and it's really lovely if you're not into the biochemistry part of it. But we are saying that a 6 foot minimum distance, 6 feet is a minimum distance to keep between people because of this, because of that sputum. Sneezing and coughing should still be done into the elbow with a mask on. So if you're wearing your mask, or even if you're not wearing your mask, as always, we're going to cough like a vampire, is what they say. Getting ready for Halloween here. But this is something we want to think about. Now, the other thing I want everybody to think about is the 6 foot minimum. So New York State says you need to either be able to stay at least 6 feet apart or wear a mask. The CDC says you need to be at least 6 feet apart and wear a mask. Internationally, some people say 12 feet. 6 feet is also a rough approximation of conversion from meters to feet. So this is another one of those situations where I encourage you to be informed. And in light of that, I want to show you this JAMA video, which should, there it goes. So this is a forceful sneeze caught on camera. And if you can read what's underneath, this measurement line is 20 inches in this section of the video. And I want you to not only notice what's dropping down within that 20-inch line, but how much sputum is going beyond the 20-inch line. This one is 43 inches. So we've got a really big sputum cloud, but there are even some particles that are going much faster, further beyond that 43-inch mark. And they're going faster than the majority of the cloud too. This is 23 to 26 feet. 7 to 8 meters for people who prefer metric. All right, so that last one should have been somewhat alarming, especially for those of us who think that 6 feet is a suggestion. With that argument in mind, I know I tend to tell people at least 10 feet, mostly because humans tend to migrate as well. But again, just a piece of information so you can all make informed decisions. So let's talk about masks. So with our masks, we require, so we've got a bunch of different types of masks that we've heard about almost a year now, so over at least 9 months. So an N95 is great. It's great for aerosol transmissions. Our frontline workers use them. They're fantastic. However, an N95, while it has been proven and quality reviewed to filter 95% of particulate, it does require a fit test, medical clearance, and it's single use. So if you have not been fit tested within the year and you have not had medical clearance, usually it's within 2 years, you really shouldn't be wearing an N95. The reason for this is there's a pulmonary exam component to that medical test. And what that doctor is trying to do is determine if you, the user, actually have the lung capacity and strength and wellness to pull the air in through that 95% filtering media. You could cause pulmonary and cardiac issues if you are not fit tested and cleared for an N95. Now, that said, if you're just not fit tested, there's a really good chance you're not filtering 95% of particulates, in which case you can very easily and justifiably say that it's going to be closer to a surgical mask. A surgical mask tends to filter about 85% of particulate. It's also single use though. You also want to look at what these surgical masks are made of, because we're seeing a lot of what I would call copycat surgical masks. You want non-woven. That's really important. Surgical masks tend to be made out of paper. And then on that same note, actually, a KN95 is N95 that's been approved by a standard overseas. So it's not actually an N95, it's to a different standard. While the standard should be the same with that 95% particulate, the way that they qualify it and how much standard deviation they accept is slightly different than what we're used to in the States. So again, be aware. A fabric face covering must cover the nose and mouth. It can be washed. Now, as your neighborhood safety professional, I do have some issues with fabric face coverings or fabric face masks. The thing is, they're not masks, they're coverings. And because so many people are calling them face masks, we have this desire to assume that they're going to be just as effective as an actual quality review mask. So we need to be aware that these fabric face coverings are exactly fabric face coverings. They're not actually masks. But that being said, that's what we have for the most part, and the CDC approves them, which is great, and New York State does. So we need to talk about how to don and doff. So donning and doffing is the act of putting on and taking off a mask. I'm actually going to demonstrate this for you. So everybody hopefully can see me. So the first thing we're going to do when we put on a mask is we're going to wash our hands, which I'm going to mime right now. And then we are going to take our mask and we're going to inspect it. So there we go. So we're going to inspect every seam. We're going to give it a little tug, a little pull all the way around. We're going to make sure that we can't see through the mask. You know, hold it up to the light, make sure that it doesn't look worn out in any way. Okay, if for any reason this looks worn or it's fraying, we need to dispose of it and get a new one. The next thing we're going to do, because we don't want to touch the mask once it's on our face, is we're going to, if you have that metal nose piece, you're actually going to bend it before you put it on. So I've already bent my nose piece. I'm going to put this on handling the outer edges over the nose and then the mouth. And I'm going to tie it behind my head gracefully. Okay. So if you noticed, I never actually touched the blue part of my mask. I made sure that it went all the way over my chin and that the nose bridge was completely set before I committed to putting it on. So now that it's on, it's contaminated. I'm not going to fidget with it. A lot of people like to, I don't know, go in the side and scoop out sweat. They get really hot. I know it's kind of gross. I know some people also like to pull them away from their face, thinking that their nose and mouth are still covered, but they can get more airflow. This is just contaminating your hands. So we really don't want to do that. So we're not going to touch the mask itself. We're not going to fidget. We're going to wash our hands again when we're done, and then we are going to handle the mask, again, just by the straps. We're going to hold it like this. Don't touch the mask itself. And we are going to put it into a bag as best as we can so that we can take it home and wash it for reuse. If it is a disposable mask, we can just throw it straight into the trash. Similarly, if you have a mask that has loops, we're going to adjust the nose piece if we have it. We're going to handle it by the ear loops only. We're going to put it on, and then in this one, this actually has a necktie so I can tighten it at the bottom. Same idea. I'm only going to handle it by the ear loops, and it's contaminated. Another thing to think about with that inspection, I got this one for my kid and then promptly didn't use it. So this mask has a seam right down the center. I don't know if that's visible over Zoom. It is good. So that seam, while becoming very popular, I think because it's slightly more comfortable with some airspace in front of your mouth, it's a really good spot for a point of failure. So when we're doing our inspection, we really want to pull at this seam because as you can see, that seam is right over my nose and mouth where all that sputum would be coming out of. So if that seam down the middle is at all compromised, we're in far worse condition than if a seam on this one is compromised because it's only going to leak around the edge. Okay. Another thing to think about, if you wear glasses, they make this wonderful stuff. They have stuff called cat crap. They've got stuff called defog. You can use spit on the inside of your glasses and then just quickly rinse it off. You can also use just dish soap. So put some dish soap on the inside of your glasses and quickly rinse it off. You can get anti-fog, anti-glare. There are a lot of different things you can do. That metal strip is going to be your best bet and making sure that your glasses don't fog. Children are difficult. So pictured, these are both pictures of my daughter. She's almost 3.5, so I like to think she's a pretty good example on getting a kid to wear a mask and how difficult that can be. So according to every regulation I've ever read, children under the age of 2 are not required nor are they encouraged to wear masks. This is in big part because of that lung function that we have concerns about and the cardiac issues that could arise. They're just too little to really be able to tell us, not to mention they're going to fidget with it, put it in their mouth. It might cause a lot more harm than good. Kids tend to be very responsive to cute or topical fabrics. So on the left, my daughter has an ABC mask and she was very excited to be able to recognize a lot more letters and spell things like cat. So we got her an ABC mask and she was very excited about it. But even you can see she just turned 3 there. She's fidgeting with her mask. It's one of the first times she really wore it in that picture. We were off to get her vaccines. However, 5 months later, you can see in the picture on the right, she's handling it by the ears. She's actually putting it on herself and it's got monsters because she's very into Halloween and monsters. So I let her pick out a fabric and we followed a CDC guideline on how to make her a mask. I really don't take her into public, so that's why I felt much more comfortable, particularly with fabric masks. But again, you want to get your kids or the kids you work with comfortable, used to, make them empowered in what they're wearing. They're going to be a lot more likely to actually wear it. You can also make it a game. Who can put on their mask the quickest? Who can keep their mask on the longest? Who, kind of like the quiet game, who can go the longest without touching their mask? Who remembered to only handle it by the ear loops? The requirement with Catherine, my daughter, what we do is, oh, do you want to go, see some other people from afar? Great, you have to wear your mask. And as soon as she either says no or doesn't do it, we don't go. It's really hard to do that. I know that, but it's just one of those things. And then, of course, demonstration. If we demonstrate correct use and compliance consistently, our kids are far more likely to follow our protocols and policies. One of the things I've seen a lot of parents struggle with is if they're in multiple households. So either divorce or moving, or we have a lot of people with a frontline worker who's living elsewhere just to protect the household, and then they see the kids separately. Kids are really used to having different routines with different people. So if you're really good about demonstrating this and requiring it, but the person you're sharing guardianship with isn't necessarily great at it, that's okay. At least one of you kind of has the rules for that house and for you. We tend to see this a lot with how children interact with babysitters and daycare providers. They're just different rules for different people, and they're very adept at this. So I mentioned that the mask is contaminated as soon as it's worn. So again, I can't stress this enough. Once it is put on, doesn't matter how long it's put on for, it is contaminated. So this picture on the left shows an exhale, and just look at how much sputum and hot air and moisture is coming out through that fabric face covering. So all of that is collecting on the inside of the mask, and that's why that inside is contaminated. When we inhale, you can see the picture on the right. You can't see my cursor. So in the picture on the right, the left hand image is a surgical mask, and the right hand image is an N95. As you can see, as you inhale, this particulate sticks to the outside and actually gets pulled into the different layers a little bit. It is imperative that we understand that our masks are contaminated both inside and out as soon as they are put on. Another way to think about it is as we breathe in, if we walk through a fine mist, our whole body will get wet with this mist, right? But if we are actively breathing and talking, the mist is going to be redirected every time we inhale toward our mouths. So all of that concentration is coming onto your mask because your mouth is acting like a vacuum as you speak. This is when, if you've seen any of those risk matrices where if nobody's speaking, there's less of a risk of spreading COVID than if everybody's talking or yelling or shouting. Same concept. If we're not taking big inhales, big exhales, we're going to contaminate our mask less, but we're still going to contaminate it because we're still breathing because we have to. When we care for our masks, we want to make sure that we change it when it's contaminated or wet. The wet part is also really important because this virus actually sticks to water molecules in the air, which is how it can go so far. That's why the sputum is the problem. The sputum inherently is not the issue. It's that the sputum attaches to the virus. That's the problem. We're going to put this directly into the trash if it's disposable, or if it doesn't pass our pre-check with if we see holes, if the fabric's otherwise compromised, or we're going to put it into a sealable bag so that we can bring it home and reuse it. We're going to wash it with soap and water and then line dry. You can use laundry detergent or bleach. I personally don't like that just pushed up on my face all day. I'm perfectly happy with regular dish soap. And this is also per the CDC guidelines. So the CDC actually says you can put this in the washing machine and in the dryer. This is another one of those things where I'm going to tell you, just because you're allowed to, I want you to critically think about it. So do we put delicate clothing in the washing machine and the dryer? Usually not, because it will compromise the integrity of the fabric and the seams. Same kind of argument with putting a mask in the washing machine and the dryer. Wouldn't we hand wash it to extend the life and make sure that we're actually getting the protection that we think we are. I also need to point out we should never put our PPE in the microwave or in the oven. There were a number of fires reported, particularly in my field of work, because those metal nose pieces were catching fire. So please don't try to disinfect these in a different way. Soap and water is your friend. So another thing we want to talk about is that live virus has been found in stool and semen. However, we do not have enough information yet to know if it's actually transmissible via those routes. However, it is important to just point out, particularly if you work, if you do a lot of bloodborne pathogen work, this is not transmitted in blood. However, I can't stress that enough. We have not seen this transmitted in blood. However, stool and semen do fall under bloodborne pathogen protocols. So if you work in custodial or with small children dealing with diapers and bathrooms, this is something you want to be aware of. We also do still have surface contamination concerns. This is inherent to being an aerosol transmissible. I know there's been some guffaw about whether or not it's a surface contaminant, but the fact that it's an aerosol, it has to have a surface contamination issue. And I'm going to illustrate that in this video. So as you can see, the water, this is just regular water in a spray bottle. While it is going, we'll say going the distance, like our aerosol, look at how many small particles are falling, frankly, even onto the finger that's on the trigger. Those larger molecules, particles, they're falling straight down, and they can stay wet and hold this virus for an extended period of time on a surface. Now, as many of us know, and we've seen publications on, different surfaces might have different lasting time for this virus. So something like copper will not be able to host a live virus for very long. However, something like stainless steel or plastic will be able to host it for a bit longer. That said, this is still a surface contaminant, so we do need to continually wash our various surfaces, particularly our high traffic touch points. Doorknobs are a really good example here. If you have a water cooler, the little knob, the spigot, how you get the water out, that's a really good example. Light switches, the door to your car, your key fob, if you share it with somebody else. All of these things are common high traffic touch points that need to be cleaned. In my house, I use soap and water. There's really no need for anything fancy. If you do want something else, please look at the N list of disinfectants put out by the EPA, and it actually explains what cleaning agent you can use and how long it needs to be wet and in contact with the surface in order to successfully kill an envelope virus such as COVID-19. All right, so now we're going to do a glove demonstration. So to put on gloves, as you can see, to don gloves, sorry. So to put on gloves, I'm going to stop share again. Okay, so we are going to select a glove that's actually a size larger than you probably think you need. We're going to wash our hands before we put our gloves on so that we know that we're not contaminating the outside of the glove. 2 gloves. And then for the purposes of this demonstration, I'm actually using chocolate syrup on the gloves, just so you can see what a contaminated glove surface might look like. Okay, so contaminated gloves. So how am I going to take these off without contaminating myself? I'm going to take my dominant hand, and my non-dominant hand is going to face away from me. I'm going to pinch at the wrist, pull up and away. I'm going to ball that glove in the hand that is still gloved. I'm going to turn this gloved hand over. I'm going to take 2 fingers and go under the wrist. Gotta do this without looking at it. I'm going to pull away, up, and over. I'm going to continue to hold it like this. And one thing I want to show, I don't know if you can see this glove that well, but there actually is chocolate syrup on what was formerly the inside of the glove I just took off. That is normal, okay? But that's also part of why this piece, I haven't changed how I'm holding this glove, but I want to make sure I only hold it by the part I was originally holding it by, because the outside may still be contaminated just because of how the glove gets taken off. It actually rolls off. Then I'm going to take this whole thing the way it is and put it into my trash bag or into a garbage can. So I do want to do a brief review of the hierarchy of controls. I believe Bridget sent out a little worksheet I had put together about this in a previous email. Was it last week?
From Teresa. Yep.
Oh, Teresa. Okay. So this is going to be really brief. If you have questions, please feel free to shout out, but there's a lot of information about this online and in your inboxes. So with our hierarchy of controls, elimination is something a lot of us are practicing right now. So we're going to stay home. We're just avoiding outside contact. We are eliminating, frankly, anything from our life that could pose a hazard. Substitution, this is a really good example of substitution. We are not doing an in-person meeting, we're doing a Zoom meeting. We are substituting a risky behavior for a less risky behavior. And the reason this is less risky is we are at higher risk for ergonomic issues or eye issues with, looking at screens so much, or, if any of you are on your phone, just looking down like this all day. If you need an ergonomic evaluation, I'm happy to help you. So we are substituting the risk of getting COVID with the risk of having, let's say, back or eye pain. That's the substituted risk. Engineering controls, I think a lot of us are hearing about them. Plexiglass walls are a great example. Doors with buzzers. Bridget mentioned I was helping GEOC. They just started buzzering their doors and they put up all this great plexiglass. Administrative controls would be the 6 foot separation and mask laws. Administrative controls, while great, are very easy to circumvent, forget, and can be very difficult to enforce. They also tend to go hand in hand with PPE or personal protective equipment, such as masks, face shields, and gloves. PPE will be the least effective step in a hierarchy of controls because, as we just saw, there are a lot of ways to kind of mess up. There are a lot of issues that can happen with your PPE. There can be a lack of ability to get your hands on appropriate PPE, and there's a lack of knowledge and training that goes with it. Administrative controls, again, as I think a lot of us have even seen in practice, that's 6 foot separation. You're asking people to use their best judgment. Some people are doing it, some people aren't doing it, some people are doing 1 foot, 2 foot, 3 feet, some people are saying 10 feet, 20 feet. Engineering controls are really hard to be circumvented. You'd have to consciously go around a plexiglass barrier. So there's that visual reminder and the need to go an extra step to avoid it. And then, of course, substitution and elimination are going to be our best controls because we are either putting ourselves at a lesser risk or we're eliminating our risks altogether. So a big thing that I personally am hoping people get out of this pandemic is just the need for safety culture. So it's human nature to forget things. It's human nature to get tired. I know a lot of us are tired of being so cautious. It's human nature to try to manipulate rules and find loopholes. That's actually another reason I urge people to think about why in New York we think it's okay to do 6 feet or masks. Is that a loophole? Is that a human nature loophole? Or is that actually something we think is effective? And I leave that to you to decide. I also want to point out that audiovisual trainings tend to only have a 20% retention. With this substitution and the exhaustion of everybody on Zoom, I expect maybe a 10% retention of what I'm talking about right now. However, as I said in the beginning, most of this shouldn't be new. So hopefully you learned a little something new, a new detail, something got clarified. And that's, in my opinion, the best we're going to get out of a training like this, which has a lot of information in it. So what are we going to do? How are we going to improve our safety culture beyond work? This is just in general. We're going to work together. We're going to lead by example, particularly for our kids, but also for each other. We're going to give gentle reminders. So instead of, oh, I keep telling you to put your mask over your nose, it's, oh, hey, did you forget? Or, hey, gentle reminder, just, make sure that thing's over your nose. Or sometimes it just falls down because some people get masks that are a little too big and they don't even realize it. We want to be a team player. So if you are low risk and just not worried that's great, but we want to be a team player for everybody. There are high-risk people in our communities. There are people who this could be devastating to. How much does it cost you psychologically, physically, even cost-wise? I think you can get some masks for free at certain places. How much does it cost to really do this for the community? And I really encourage you to ask your department about behavior-based safety programs. These are going to be programs that are already established, usually by your safety department, that help encourage a good safety culture through positive behaviors. So to summarize, we do have an aerosol transmissible with a surface contamination concern, because that's just part of what an aerosol transmissible is. We need to be a minimum of 6 feet apart regardless of the type or the amount of PPE worn. Masks must be cared for, worn at all times, and please, please do not share them. PPE is the least effective on the hierarchy of controls. We want to consider permanent or hard to be controls, such as engineering controls. Now, although I've said, I think 2 or 3 times now that PPE is the least effective on the hierarchy of controls, it is still incredibly important that we keep that piece in play every day when we're outside, or in other buildings with other people. Sometimes it's all we've got, which makes it the best. We want to work together to remind, remember, and comply with regulations, and please lead by example. That's going to be our strongest motivator for a good safety culture. So if you have questions and for some reason you don't want to ask after this slide, please feel free to reach out to me directly. I'm happy to answer any of your questions. I also have a YouTube channel with some information on things such as soap and water and hierarchy of controls. My YouTube channel is under Absolute EHS. I also have a variety of podcasts posted on Patreon. I've got COVID survivors on there. I've got a neonatologist. I've got someone who works for a very well-known health organization that I interviewed. There's some interesting stuff up there. But that is all I've got for now. So Bridget, I'm going to give it back to you.
Great. Thank you very much for that great kind of presentation. I definitely learned a little bit more. So at this time, I definitely want to encourage folks to put into the chat, or feel free to kind of speak up. You know, this was a lot of information that I think applies to any setting in which we're working and or living, but we know that all of you are working directly with youth, which poses its own kind of challenges. So we wanted to ensure that there was plenty of time for folks to address questions specific to working with youth to Samantha, so that we could kind of think through what challenges might still be coming up for you all. So again, please put them into the chat if you have them, or we could unmute people if we need to do that.
Yeah, particularly if you have a scenario and don't want to type it out, feel free just to unmute yourself.
Yep.
Thank you for being a contact tracer, Michelle.
Samantha, have you heard of any other tips? You had some great ones related to mask wearing, just about maybe from your work with other programs about what's been working with youth. What are some best practices in encouraging this good behavior?
Sure. So behavior-based safety it's a whole realm, but really what it's about is encouraging good behaviors and being sure that we don't associate I want to say a bad behavior, a behavior that's undesirable with a negative effect, which is kind of counterintuitive to a lot of us. So my favorite example of behavior-based safety is actually from when I worked in a company that I had engineers on one side of the building and I had technicians on the other side of the building, and they hardly interacted. But I created a program in which we could anonymously nominate good safety behaviors. And that could be the person was involved in an incident. Maybe they even went to the hospital, but when they came back, they helped with the incident investigation. Or somebody proactively saw something that could be hazardous and reported it immediately. Better yet, they fixed it themselves and then reported the fix. And the fact that we can reward the people who even did have an incident, that's what makes it a good behavior-based safety program, because it's basically, it's non-discriminatory. So if you messed up in some way, as long as you fixed it in the end, or you were proactive in fixing it and you reported it and helped out, that's what we want to see in a behavior-based safety program. So I know a common one we tend to hear about is no incidents reported, we all get pizza. That is not a good safety behavior program, because what that really encourages people to do is not report anything, because they don't want to be the one that caused the whole group not to get pizza. So that's how we think about behavior-based safety.
That's great. Thanks.
Sure.
We have a question. What type of cloth, cotton blend, etc., is best if using a cloth mask?
That's a great question. Honestly, the information I keep reading seems to change a lot. So what I would say is a polyethylene blend is going to be your best bet. So that's a type of plastic. So cotton, we want to look for 2 layers, ideally 3. The polyethylene tends to have a static charge, and that's going to hold on to the virus, that just inherent charge to it. And then the cotton not only is going to help your face breathe, but cotton is also on a molecular level rather porous and will also catch other things. The other wonderful thing about these masks is it helps filter out allergens. There are like a lot of other benefits to wearing masks. So that 3-layer minimum cotton polyethylene, or if there's an activated carbon layer, that's great, but just remember that carbon needs to be recharged. So that's something we see more in a disposable mask. All right. Oh, okay. Thanks, Shannon. Thanks for being a contact tracer. Only one of us needs to wear a mask. I would say that's wrong. That's the short answer. So the reason that is incorrect, and hopefully you can see it now too, and I just encourage everybody to share that JAMA video. It's a really good article about how this can travel 27 feet. The science behind it is the people who did that research actually took turbulence from the heat and moisture from your mouth and factored that into the research. So that 6 feet might be good if it's a pretty windy day and there's 6 feet between 2 people, but in an indoor setting when there's not that much and there's only turbulence and heat coming from your mouth, we do have potential for 27 feet. So if you think about that, isn't it better for 2 people to wear a mask rather than 1? The other thing we want to think about is an N95 is going to protect the wearer from aerosols better than the person who's with, so if one person's wearing an N95, they're going to be better protected against aerosols from the other person, but that other person's not necessarily protected from the aerosols of the N95 wearer. Whereas a surgical mask tends to contain large droplets really well, which is why when patients come into hospitals, we tend to put surgical masks on them because it keeps the patient's germs with them. So each mask actually has a different task. The more masks we have, the better. If you need a more layman version of this, if you have kind of a difficult person, show them that hierarchy of controls, that upside down pyramid, and just point out PPE is the least effective thing, but at the moment it's all we've got. So the more we have, the better off we all are. Does that help, Lee? You're welcome.
So this one's related to the use of neck gaiters.
Neck gaiters. Honestly, it qualifies as a face covering. And anything if you're gonna say I'm wearing a neck gaiter, I'm not wearing anything, please wear the neck gaiter. If you're saying you'll wear either, I don't know, a neck gaiter or a fun CDC pattern thing with cute snails on it, what's more comfortable? What are you less likely to fidget with? That's my real question. My problem with gaiters isn't necessarily the fabric. It's the fact that people feel that they can do this all day and be totally fine, because the gaiters are being marketed as something that you can pull up and down as needed. But as we just reviewed, fidgeting and pulling these masks on and off, especially onto your neck or onto your shirt, or where you hold your child, that might not be that great. So gaiters good if it's all you're going to wear. However, there are contamination issues inherent in the design of the gaiter.
Okay, so I think this is another great question related regarding face shields, using them in addition or instead of a face covering. Can you comment on face shields?
Sure. So in addition is great. Again, PPE is our least effective. The more PPE that's not going to negate additional PPE, the better. So what I would say is some people, for whatever reason, cannot wear a face covering. This is just, if you're looking at the entire population, there's going to be some percentage with legitimate reasons that they can't wear this. So please don't take this as a go-ahead to attack people for only wearing face shields. I just want to throw that out there first. What I will say when it comes to face shields is remember that spray bottle video, remember the JAMA video. So a face shield tends to be maybe about 3 inches away from your face. How much sputum is falling down before it even hits the face shield? And then depending on what you're doing, if you're shouting, if you're singing, if you just happen to be a, let's say, wet talker or a sneezer, how much is going to accumulate on that face shield and then drip off? Are you maintaining it? As you maintain and clean it, what are you contaminating in the process? So better than nothing. It's almost like wearing an engineering control, but they don't go far down enough for it to be truly effective against an aerosol, in my opinion. Your better bet would be something called a PAPR, which nobody's heard about, and that's okay. So I'm going to start with what an APR is. An air purifying respirator is something we traditionally see as a gas mask that does not cover the eyes. So it goes over the nose and mouth, and it usually has 1 or 2 cartridges on it. And those you can remove, you can replace, you can select a cartridge that's appropriate for whatever it is you're trying to filter for. Those need to be fit tested just like an N95, and they are more effective than the N95. The reason I say PAPR, which is a powered air purifying respirator, is those don't need fit testing. What a PAPR is actually a hood that goes over your entire head, which means we're covering all mucous membranes on the head. And it has a hose that goes to basically a fanny pack that's on the small of your back that has a fan pulling air in through the filter cartridge and blowing clean filtered air into the hood. So there is no fit test required. You are probably closer to 99% filtered on air. We aren't going to have those issues with, heat and irritation and, people saying they can't breathe because we're literally blowing air around your entire head. And what I like about them is there's usually it's just a big clear window. So if you're working with kids, if you're working, if you're in a speech therapy type situation or people who can't hear very well, they can actually see your whole face. You can emote, you can talk really well. The problem with PAPRs, and this is why nobody's heard of them, is they tend to start at about $1,500. There are some makers out there who are trying to create PAPRs. There's actually someone I consulted with who's making them for about $30. However, they're not FDA approved. They're DIY. And because they're DIY and not FDA approved, there's no real quality control. So I can only be so confident in how good they are. And that's another reason I really want to encourage people to get the information and make your own decision. Just because something is legal or technically correct doesn't actually mean it makes sense. And that's what I really, if you take nothing but that away from this presentation, please try to take that away. Did that answer the question, Liz? Excellent.
Any other questions that have come up? Feel free to put those into the chat or speak up.
Hi. I have a quick question about hand washing. I'm preparing to be doing outdoor programs with kids, and I understand why soap and water is more effective than hand sanitizer. But I'm wondering if there's not running water outside where I'll be doing programs. You said something about clean running water, and I've heard of some programs using spray bottles, one with soapy water and one with clean water. And I wonder how you would view the effectiveness of that sort of hand washing protocol.
That's very creative. I like that actually. There's off the top of my head, I can't think of a reason not to do it that way. It wouldn't be as effective because you don't have copious amounts of running water, but the idea is you get the soap on the kid's hands. What I would be mildly concerned about is how much they're diluting soap to get the soapy water into the spray bottle. So what I might propose to those types of groups is why not use one of those, I don't want to like use name brands, but like why don't you use one of those fun concentrate all natural I'm talking about biodegradable soaps in like the little jar that can go a really long way, and then use a spray bottle to rinse it all off. Now that said, you would be confined to exactly how much water you have in that spray bottle if you're out in the woods. I'm thinking of like when I teach wilderness first aid. So for that reason, I'd probably use hand sanitizer and then soap, a very, very small amount of soap. Make sure it lathers, add a little bit of water, make sure it lathers because that lather is our visual indicator that it's doing its job. And then rinse as best as possible. That's a good question.
Thank you.
Thank you. While we're talking about hand sanitizers, because it just occurred to me, if you are using hand sanitizer or you are in charge of purchasing hand sanitizer, make sure that it's not an antibacterial only. I've seen in a number of places, mostly back in January and February, people were buying alcohol-free antibacterial hand sanitizer. It's great against bacteria, but COVID's a virus. So we need to make sure that these are antivirals and that they have the appropriate concentration of alcohol.
Well, if we don't have any other questions, I think we can go ahead and kind of wrap it up. Sam, you said that you would welcome folks reaching out to you directly. Is that correct?
Sure. So that's part of why all my information's up there. So if you have a short, specific question, like the one about soap in the woods, easy peasy. If you and please do email me if you are running a program and you just don't know where to start. I am doing I'm doing half price on my rate for COVID specific stuff, and as some people will probably report, I'm happy to work within your budget because I know everybody's hurting right now budget wise. It just doesn't make sense in my mind to withhold information for monetary gain. I'd rather us all get through this, get to the end, and be. That's part of that safety culture. So please do not hesitate to reach out if you have questions or need help.
I think we got one last question here from Linda. How long can COVID live on hard surfaces?
I'm going to not so gracefully dodge that question because the research keeps changing. It's anywhere from 3 hours to 7 days, and then that 7 days actually got knocked down to somewhere between 3 and 5 days. But the reason I'm going to dodge it, even though we can look all this up, we can look it up, and I'm happy to send you the research on it, is because here's my gross example. In my opinion, very cute child, when she hawks a loogie onto her hand and then wipes my face with it, versus if she were to just cough on my face, how much more moisture is involved in the loogie versus the cough? So the time it would take for that sputum and the water in the sputum to actually evaporate in conjunction with the surface type, those are both variables that need to be taken into account. I think actually I did a webinar about grocery shopping a few months back. And what I was saying is, so if the shopping cart rail is contaminated and you haven't washed it, and then you put your hand on that contaminated rail, and then your hand on, I'm going to use this side of the chocolate syrup. I'm going to put my hand on this chocolate syrup. I've now contaminated this part of the chocolate syrup, right? Now, if I put this back on the shelf, maybe in 5 minutes, maybe in 2 days, the virus is going to, it's going to basically be distilled, it's going to be dehydrated because all the water will have evaporated off. And in addition, plastic can only harbor this virus for so long. However, if I were to spit on my hand and have COVID and then touch the bottle while I hide the label, that's going to take a lot longer for that sputum to evaporate. And it's not actually dependent on the material type of the container. So I am sorry to dodge the question, Linda, but I hope that does help.
Okay, I think we're good then to wrap up. Thank you again, Samantha, for taking some time to share your knowledge and expertise with the group. I'm happy we got to get some specific questions from folks. And Samantha does serve as a local resource right here that you all can reach out to, as she had outlined. We will be, likely Teresa will be sending a follow-up email to you all with just some brief requests for feedback. We'd love to get your feedback and any ideas that you might have for additional trainings. And I think that is all that I have. Samantha, anything else you'd like to close with?
This was great. Thanks for, this is, I have to say, the first Zoom where I've had to go back and forth so much between live demos and virtual backgrounds. So thanks for bearing with me, guys.
No, it was fantastic. Thank you so much.
Great.
All right, take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.